You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
History will remember Lindsey Graham sucked up to Trump. Nothing else, based on an article by John Casey. Lindsey Graham was never a maverick. He was a transaction. The record. The source story is about Lindsey Graham's political obituary, a long Senate career that ended with him tied, by choice, to Donald Trump's corruption, election denial, and nihilism. That's the frame. The more important question is what power Graham actually exercised while he was alive politically, and what he used it for. Power means choice. Graham was not a bystander trapped by events. He was a sitting senator, a Judiciary Committee chair, a Republican strategist with access, influence, and media oxygen. That is institutional power. He chose to use it to normalize Trump after calling him a kook, after warning Trump would destroy the party, after admitting the obvious about his racism and demagoguery. The pivot was not confusion. It was adaptation. That distinction matters because it exposes the standard lie of contemporary elite politics, that the people at the top are swept along by forces larger than themselves. Graham was one of the forces. He was not dragged into the wreckage. He helped steer the bargain. The source gets one thing exactly right. Graham's defining skill was survival. He'd understood that his seat mattered more to him than principle, consistency, or democratic self-respect. Once Trump proved he could dominate South Carolina Republican politics, Graham made a simple calculation. He would not defend the Republic if doing so threatened his career. He would instead wrap himself around the president who was poisoning it. That bargain is ugly because it was conscious. Graham did not merely excuse Trump. He promoted him, entertained him, defended his failures, and worked to keep himself indispensable inside Trump's orbit. When he suggested South Carolina families should send their sons and daughters to the Middle East for Trump's war fantasies, that was not statesmanship gone wrong. It was a senator volunteering other people's children as expendable currency. The institutions he broke. The cleanest measure of Graham's damage is not his rhetoric, but his institutional role. As Judiciary Chair, he helped deliver Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation in the closing days of a presidential election, locking in a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court majority for a generation. That was not a footnote. That was architecture. It was how partisan power gets converted into durable constitutional damage. He also played his part in the Kavanaugh spectacle, where Republican outrage theater was used to bulldoze through an already tainted process. Graham's shouting did not defend ethics, it buried them. The point was never principle. The point was to convert political aggression into judicial power while pretending the opposite side was the one violating norms. That is the real pattern here. The people who shout loudest about order often do the most to corrupt it. Graham understood that performance well enough to make a career out of it. Misdirection as strategy. The article's weakest moment is when it risks turning Graham into the story's sole villain. He deserves the condemnation, but the larger system made him useful. South Carolina Republican voters, Senate leadership, conservative media, the donor ecosystem, and the Supreme Court pipeline all rewarded the same behavior: loyalty over legitimacy, escalation over restraint, obedience over truth. That is why blame cannot stop at personal disgrace. Graham was an instrument of a broader Republican strategy that treats authoritarian drift as a branding problem and democratic damage as a manageable cost. The party did not merely tolerate his servility, it profited from it. And the media habit of narrating this kind of figure as a tragic fallen statesman is its own form of misdirection. It softens deliberate behavior into biography. It turns a political operator into a cautionary tale about character, when the more useful lesson is structural. Institutions repeatedly reward men who know how to degrade them from within. What this really shows. Graham's legacy is not that he betrayed an ideal he once held. It is that he never treated democratic responsibility as real enough to outweigh self-preservation. That is the governing ethic of too much of Washington. The office is sacred. The republic is optional. This is how authoritarian politics advances in a constitutional system that still looks, on paper, intact, not only through coups and mobs, but through senators who know better and help anyway. Not only through lies, but through careerists who make the lies functional. Graham's career is not an exception to the system. It is one of its most legible products. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Raw Story for today's article. With the automated voice of Lesak, thanks for listening.